Welcome to Cinecynics.
I'm Craig.
I'm Mark.
And coming up, our review of G.I. Joe Retaliation. And if knowing is half the battle, this movie sucks. Earlier this week, the trailer for Roland Emmerich's White House Down was released. Now, I really can't say anything about this trailer because it was definitely a teaser trailer and there wasn't too much of the plot that was told in the trailer. But it's definitely the same story as Olympus Has Fallen. And just based off the trailer, I think Olympus Has Fallen will be the better movie. White House Down might have better production value, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be a better movie.
Judging from the trailer, it really does look an awful lot like, if not completely the same as Olympus Has Fallen. Hollywood seems to be notorious for doing this, how they have several copycat projects of what's essentially the same movie in development at the same time. Like you have your Deep Impact and...
Armageddon.
Yeah, Armageddon.
Mirror, Mirror, Snow White and the Huntsman.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Roland Emmerich is certainly capable of making some memorable films. You know, you have your Independence Day and Stargate, but you also have your, 2012 and 10,000 BC and Day After Tomorrow. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess we could just wait and see what happens. It's recently been reported that Matthew McConaughey has been offered the lead role in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Now, I know it may be tempting to think that this is Matthew McConaughey and what's he doing exactly in a Christopher Nolan movie, but I think I should remind you that this is the same Matthew McConaughey that was in A Time to Kill, and if there is anyone capable of eliciting a good performance out of anybody, it is Christopher Nolan, so I remain somewhat optimistic about this.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey was also in The Lincoln Lawyer, so he's definitely a good actor. He's been doing a lot of really good independent work recently. And I think he's a very capable actor. It's a little bit weird. And I'm going to stick to being a little bit weirded out by Matthew McConaughey maybe in a sci-fi movie? A sci-fi movie? I mean, all right, I'll trust in Nolan.
As long as he doesn't take his shirt off in this one.
So we're definitely going to see a reboot of Escape from New York, but it's either going to be Jason Statham or Tom Hardy for the lead role as Snake Plissken. Now, honestly, I'd rather see Tom Hardy in the role. He is going to be Mad Max, but I think he could pull off two different 80s action roles that were made famous by other people. I know Kurt Russell wasn't too happy about this remake, but I would rather see Tom Hardy than Jason Statham, because Jason Statham just plays pretty much himself, and he really needs to be more of a cold-hearted, just badass guy than what we normally see him as.
Quite frankly, I'm at a loss to understand why this movie is even being remade. As was just mentioned, Kurt Russell wasn't happy when he heard about this, and neither was John Carpenter, the director of the original. And I can understand why. Anytime you take someone else's intellectual property, as the studios are wont to do, to appropriate other people's hard work, for the sole purpose of just cashing in even more on it, it's kind of an insult. And, I also like Jason Statham and Tom Hardy quite a lot, and I'd rather see them in something that's, more worthy of their talents. And finally, both the domestic and international trailers for the Wolverine have been released, and it looks leagues above the last film. This was something I was already looking forward to, but seeing this trailer has actually sent my expectations through the roof.
Yeah, this movie looks to be like an amazing story for the Wolverine. And I'm not just saying that because the Wolverine is probably one of my favorite of all time Marvel characters. I'm saying it because it just looks like a damn good movie. I mean, you've got Wolverine being a very vulnerable character.
And they decided to go with the story of his time that he spent in Japan, which I always thought to be part of the most intriguing component of the Wolverine origin story.
Yeah, and like I said before, he's going to be vulnerable in this movie because he loses his powers, it seems. That in this trailer, he gets shot and he can't heal. So that's going to add a lot deeper character development for him. And this is going to take place after X-Men 3, which was also a terrible X-Men movie. So I expect the continuity not to really be there, but also, I really just could not care less about all those other movies. I want to see him in his own movie that he drives, because he is such a deep and complex character that this is what he deserves. James Mangold is a very underrated director. He did Night and Day and 3:10 to Yuma, both very underrated movies, I think. And he knows how to direct action. He does a wonderful job at it. And it doesn't look like there's too much CG, but there was a whole train sequence that was completely CG, and I don't really like it too much because it is supposed to be like a gritty, dark type of movie, and when you see the flashy CG, it takes you out of that, but I'm still, overall, this movie looks amazing, and I can't wait to see it. G.I. Joe Retaliation, directed by John M. Chu, stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Channing Tatum, Adrian Palicki, Bruce Willis, and a bunch of other people I really don't care about. In a story that pits the G.I. Joes against their own government, which has been secretly taken over by Cobra.
Not having seen G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, I didn't have much expectation for Retaliation one way or the other, but I have to say, the thing that I probably enjoyed most about this movie is when the credits rolled up at the end.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that were wrong with this movie. There were, for me personally, there was maybe one action scene that was kind of cool, and that was the cliff scene with the ninjas, and I maybe laughed twice, but there's so many things outweighing all the bad, all the bad things outweighing the good, that it was just a mess. From the acting to the script writing. The script was written by the guys who wrote Zombieland. How disappointing can you... It's so disappointing.
Well, maybe that's also part of the reason that this movie doesn't work, that they chose to use, scribes whose, primary strength is in writing comedy for a movie that's, it's supposed to be a lighthearted action movie. I guess maybe with the lighthearted aspect of it, but beyond that, they have no conception of how to write action.
Yeah, none of the characters worked at all. The Rock was enjoyable, but The Rock was The Rock. He was, there. He was just there.
He had some decent actors on screen, but,
Bruce Willis sucked even in the movie. And it's hard to make Bruce Willis suck.
No, Bruce Willis didn't suck. The movie made Bruce Willis suck.
Yeah.
They gave him absolutely nothing to do. And in fact, when I thought about it afterwards, his inclusion in this movie is probably what brought it together. If they didn't have Bruce Willis, even for the brief time that he was in it, they wouldn't have had a movie at all.
Yeah, and some of the casting choices were kind of weird. They casted this blind samurai guy later in the movie. The RZA. He's a rapper, /actor, /writer, director now, but he was really bad. He was just hamming it up. Yeah. Terribly, like he was doing it like old kung fu style, which I have to say did not fit well into this movie.
Well, yeah, but even beyond that, it didn't even harken back to some of like those old kung fu movies and like the bad dubbing that you would expect and maybe trying to capture that. This was just, I don't know what it was.
There was also a very muddled plot. Yeah. Involving Storm Shadow and Zoltarn, or whatever his name is, the guy who played the Mummy in The Mummy, the one by Stephen Sommers.
Yeah, and a huge plot hole to think that every nation's entire nuclear arsenal is accessible by one single device, and that they would launch them all up at once, and that by destroying them, there'd be no more nuclear weapons.
Which is bullshit because they would only fire some; they wouldn't fire everything.
No, so major plot hole.
I think the funniest part, and I don't think it was intentionally supposed to be funny, was the president, or the guy who was pretending to be the president, Zartan, or whatever his name was. He was kind of funny in a stupid, corny way. I think it was because he's just a great actor.
Jonathan Pryce.
Yeah, he's just a great actor, so he could just pull it off out of his ass and do wonders with such a terrible script.
I just was wondering the whole time, what is he doing in this movie? Just as an actor, like, how did they rope him into doing this? I really hope they paid him very, very well. And the same thing for Bruce Willis.
And also, the only reason why they knew where anything was because of Storm Shadow's character. And they had to do it through a character. That's a plot hole. If the characters themselves can't achieve and get to the end of the movie, to get from point A to point B, and the characters themselves can't do it, and they have to rely on a secondary character within the film, that's a plot hole. That's terrible. And it was all reliant on Storm Shadow turning sort of good, so to give them all the information about Cobra and his plans against and destroying the world.
Another major problem I found in this movie is that I feel that any sense of investment from the audience is heavily derivative of being familiar with the G.I. Joe universe. And for someone like myself, I mean, I knew, I used to see some of the cartoons when I was, younger. But apart from that, it wasn't something I was invested in to begin with. And, if you're not really familiar with the universe, there's absolutely no way that you can get into this movie. I sat the entire time feeling like I was in a daze, like I was staring at the screen. And the whole movie, it had this very plastic, inorganic feel. It was this cookie cutter studio action movie with absolutely no substance. It was almost a non-movie.
Yeah, and it was probably due in part to mostly the studio. And I think John M. Chu has a very good eye for choreography, and he's done the Step Up to the Streets, and he did Step Up 3D, and he does have a good eye for choreography. So you'd think that would translate well to very choreographed and very slick action scenes. But for some reason, I feel like he didn't get a chance to really give his vision to the movie. So I'm not going to blame the director on this, because it was a studio flick to get more money. I was laughing, not in a good way. I was laughing at parts that were supposed to be somewhat serious, and I out loud was laughing. I was holding my gut and holding my mouth to not disturb anybody in the theater, because I was laughing so damn hard. And I don't like it when I have to do that in a movie. I want to enjoy myself. I want to have a good time. It was so hard for me to try to enjoy this movie.
G.I. Joe Retaliation has to be one of the most inane, banal, empty movies that I've experienced in a very long time. And one that I felt almost insulted as a viewer. Insulted that they would even try to rope me into seeing this. There's absolutely no way that I can recommend this movie. Skip it. Avoid it at all costs.
Yeah, I can't recommend this movie either. The characters were dull, you didn't care about the stakes, and it was the end of the world as we know it, and you didn't care about the stakes whatsoever. It was just a poorly executed movie, and I can't recommend it. But yet, somehow, it was better than the first movie. If you enjoyed CineCynics, like, comment, and subscribe.
Follow us also on Twitter, Facebook, and Blogspot.
And check back every Saturdays and throughout the week for more movie news, recommendations, and reviews.
And our question this week is, does anyone in their right mind think that a movie produced by a toy company will really be any good?